This episode is sponsored by the Bridge to Recovery, a nonprofit program on 115 acres near Bowling Green, Kentucky, a tranquil place where they've been changing lives for over 40 years. Their people improve their quality of life by acknowledging past emotional wounds and healing from all forms of trauma. The CEO, Paul Hamlin, has been a friend of mine for 20 years. Call him directly at 858-945-7848. That's 858-945-7848, or you can learn more about the Bridge to Recovery by clicking the link in the show notes or visiting thebridgetorecovery.com. Thank you for listening to The Path to Authenticity. My name's Tom Gentry. I think of this show as the opposite of small talk. You'll hear real conversations with real people who know who they are. We talk about what makes them who they are, how they became who they are, and how we might become truer expressions of who we are.
I'm Kevin Petersen, and this is The Path to Authenticity.
I'm Tom Gentry. Thanks for listening. This episode features a guy named Kevin Petersen, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist based in Denver, lives in Jacksonville Beach. But Kevin has made a career for himself out of helping families who are suffering from addiction, and he's written a book about it, which you'll hear a little bit about. So, I thought it'd be great to have him on the show. He focuses a lot on the family ramifications of addiction and not only the identified patient. And he focuses a lot on codependency and related issues, which if you've listened to the podcast, you know that I feel like those are pretty relevant as it relates to personal authenticity. So we had a really nice conversation. Kevin seems like a great guy. So here you go, Kevin Petersen.
Just the product of some bad seeds, just some guys that grew into weeds. But we learn how to...
Kevin, it's great to have you. Thanks for doing this with me.
It's my pleasure, Tom. I'm looking forward to speaking with you.
Well, here we are. So why don't you just tell everybody what you do for a living?
Absolutely. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. My office is in Denver, Colorado. I currently reside in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. So I do telehealth and video therapy for people in Colorado. And for people outside of Colorado, I do family case management work, which actually is a significant part of my business. And I wrote a book about what I do called Chronic Hope. It's Parenting the Addicted Child.
Wow. Parenting the Addicted Child.
Yeah.
So, well, there are so many parents now who need a book like that.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked a little bit. We've both been sober a long time. And, like me, you've seen over the last 15 years, the whole complexion of the treatment industry has just changed, and it's been inundated with young adults and teenagers, really.
Absolutely.
And I've talked about it in my story a little bit. I got sober in 96, and at that time, I went to this facility. I was 23 years old. It was full. There was one other guy there in his 20s. Everybody else was in their late 30s, mid 40s, early 50s. My roommate was 67 years old, and there was an 83-year-old on our unit. And now if you walk into a facility, it's all young adults.
Mm.
It's you don't see too many guys our age showing up in treatment these days. And so, there are a lot of guys who, like me, never really transitioned into adulthood. And they kind of started the cycle of addiction before that change ever took place, which is a completely different client to work with than someone who's created a life for themselves and then lost it or jeopardized it, So how is it you came to write this book?
Well, it's, I got to sort of backtrack just a smidge and give you a little bit of, who I am, sort of where that comes from. I grew up in a home of addiction in Palo Alto, California. My mom was a prescription drug addict. And I started drinking and using when I was about 12, 13. And ended up going to college in 1982 and completely fallen apart with drugs, alcohol, and the whole thing. And sort of what ended up happening is I got sober in 1991 because my family drew a line and held it. And back then they called it tough love. It was like, you're out, we're done, sober up, or never call us again.
Right.
And what I ended up doing was starting to see a therapist with my dad in the beginning of 1991. And that therapist kind of gently brought me along the road of the fact that I was an alcoholic and an addict. And I ended up getting sober in AA. My sobriety date is May 5th, 1991. I moved to Denver. I was always in sales. I got married and divorced. And in 2007, I was 43 years old. I was 16 years sober, and I was empty inside. And I knew I needed to make a life change. And I went back to school, and I got a master's in marriage and family therapy. And I graduated from Regis University in August of 2011. I worked for a community health facility for 3 years. And then in April of 2014, I opened up a private practice 1 day a week in Denver, Colorado. And that in April, that one day filled instantly. So in May, I opened up another day, and that day filled instantly. And then I quit my regular job, and I've been in private practice ever since. And the answer to your question is, from the day I opened my doors, the people that walked in were families that were struggling with addiction and codependency, and they didn't know what to do. And after 4.5, 5 years of literally the same family walking into my door, into my office every single day, I sat down and I started writing a book, and this is what came of it. And it's only about 110 pages long. It's very practical. It's very direct. And it's very much my personal experience and my professional experience. And what I want to do is just help families, give them a plan. Here's the plan. Follow the plan.
Mm-hmm. So that's what it is. It's a plan?
Yep. Yeah, it is. It's a simple, straightforward plan that helps people. Well, basically, there's plan A, plan B, and plan C. And plan A is, if you have someone in the house that's struggling with drugs and alcohol, whether it's an adult or a child or whatever, you just sit them down and say, from here forward, there's a new set of rules. And the new rules are, we're going to do drug testing. We're going to do breathalyzing or sober link. We're going to do family therapy. You have to be fully sober, and we don't care if you go to meetings or not, but you gotta get sober, and we'll support you and help you in however you want to do that. But we're no longer going to accept the drugs and the alcohol and the abusive behavior.
Hmm.
And you give them a time frame, whether it's a week or a month, to get it together. And if they don't, then we go to plan B, which is treatment. And then if they refuse plan B, then we go to plan C, which is we love you, but we can't have you here anymore.
Hmm.
And it's not you're not bullying anyone, you're not punishing anyone, it's not shaming anyone. It's we will respect your choices. But if you're going to choose to use drugs and alcohol and treat people poorly, you're choosing not to be part of this family.
Hmm.
But as soon as you want to choose sobriety and choose to get help, we will be there for you in a heartbeat. And that is what I do, and that is how I spend my days, is working with those families. And a lot of what I do is get the family to the point where they can do the intervention, get the person into treatment, or get them to where they need to be. And then I like to get into the family and help the family start to understand what codependency looks like, what enabling looks like, what do people mean by accepting unacceptable behavior. And one of the sad things is that generally the system is so layered that the families don't even see it as abnormal.
Right.
They think this is the normal. This is the norm. And that's what I thought when I grew up in my house.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was normal to come home at 3:00 and mom was in her pajamas, slurring her words and with glassy eyes and in bed with yet another migraine. I thought that was normal.
Right.
Unfortunately, it turns out that's anything but normal.
Or functional anyway.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of a labor of love, to be honest with you, Tom. It's I like helping people. The funny part is that I get a lot of resistance from the families. Not funny, it's sad. I get a lot of resistance from the families. Once we put the person into treatment or get the person the help, the addict help they need, the families back away. And they're like, we're good. It's all good. Everything's cool. And I'm like, no. This is, the party's just starting, so I'm a big advocate of the family healing as well. One of my favorite phrases is, you can't expect the addict to do something you're not willing to do. And, if you want them to get into 12-step recovery or some kind of recovery, you have to do the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I spend my days. I do it now on the phone and in video. When I go back to Denver, I do it in my office. I have 4 people that work for me that do it.
Wow.
And I'm kind of looking to maybe taking this to the next level and actually training people on how to do this. And because I find that a lot of people in the mental health business have absolutely no idea how to deal with families that are struggling with codependency and addiction. So
what do you think where's the problem lie in that, do you think?
There's a chicken and the egg thing that goes on that I find really interesting, and that is that there's a lot of belief in the therapeutic world that addiction is a byproduct of trauma or attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that. I don't see it that way. I think people are alcoholics and addicts because their bodies react differently to drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
I think those people tend to have a lot of trauma and attachment issues. But I think a lot of times therapists either don't understand addiction or don't give it the respect that it's due. And the same thing with codependency. I think that a lot of the people that I know, therapists that I know and respect and think are good people, end up calling me because they're like, man, I've been working with this family for a year. And, the dad's an alcoholic and the mom's codependent and they just don't know what to do. And he just keeps drinking and she keeps nagging him. And I'm like, why are you still working with them? Why haven't you turned them over to somebody that understands these things? And,
Right.
well, I took a class in substance abuse in graduate school. I'm fully prepared.
Yeah.
And here's my example to you. And this is, I occasionally lecture back at my university at Regis in their substance abuse course. And I had a young woman ask me during the lecture, she said, I'm really getting the feeling that you think you have to be in recovery to be an effective addiction counselor. I said, well, let me answer the question this way. I looked at her, I said, do you have kids? She was probably like 35 or 40. And she said, yeah, I have two. I said, did you experience any postpartum depression? And she's like, yes, I definitely did. I said, why didn't you call me? I'm a fully licensed therapist and I'm fully capable of handling that. And she just kind of stared at me. I said, because I'm a guy. And I said, and how could you possibly expect me to understand what postpartum depression feels like? And she's like, right. I said, how could you possibly understand what addiction feels like if you're not in recovery or an addict? And I said, and it doesn't mean you can't do it, but you have to know addicts and codependents will smell you out in a heartbeat if you don't have any knowledge of what they're dealing with. They can pick up on a lack of authenticity so quickly. And the thing about addicts is if they go see a therapist and the therapist knows nothing about addiction, the therapist will want to talk about all these other things other than the substance abuse.
Right.
And the addict's like, this is great. I get to tell everybody I'm going to therapy so they get off my back. And this person isn't asking me anything about addiction,
Yeah.
And the same thing with the codependency. The codependents come into therapy and all they want to do is complain about the addict. And it's like, well, okay, well, wait a minute. How are you taking care of you? Well, how are you setting a boundary? Oh, I set boundaries. He just goes through them. Well, why are you still there?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you mean? Well, if he violates the boundaries, why are you still with him? That's up to you. That's a choice you're making. You're making a choice to stay in a dysfunctional relationship. That's not his fault. That's your fault. And a lot of therapists are afraid to say those things. I think they don't know those things. They don't get it. And also it goes against everything we're taught in graduate school, which is let the client drive the bus. Listen to let them pick the conversations, let them. And I tell people when I do these lectures at Regis, I'm like, so everything they're teaching you, that doesn't work for addicts and alcoholics and codependents. You have to turn the game around and be like, so look, we're going to, until I know that you're sober, I can't help you. Because I'm treating the wrong person. If you're actively using, I can't help you. And if someone's actively chasing an addict down the street, trying to fix them and take care of them, I can't help them. If they want to start taking care of themselves, and that's what I tell people, Tom, is that if they say, well, what's the best thing I can do to help my person's recovery? I say, get into your own recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you change the family system by getting into recovery, it'll impact the family like nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
It'll force the family to change. If you stop chasing them down the street, guess what? They're going to turn around and be like, hey, why aren't you chasing them?
Right. Well, when the addict or alcoholic begins to get better, then the family, if the family isn't engaging in their own recovery process, kind of doesn't know what to do with them. So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, the change is going to take place somehow. It's going to unfold.
Yeah. Well, and one of the other things that happens too, this is a really fascinating phenomenon to watch occur, is that they'll actually unconsciously force the person back into their addiction because that's the role they're comfortable with.
Right.
They'll tolerate the fact that the person stops going to meetings or stops going to therapy or stops doing the drug testing, because that gives them their sense of purpose again. I'm back into the management program.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so critical that the family recover.
Yeah.
Because they have to get out of their job and their role And so that when the addict comes back, it's like, hey, love you. We're on your, we think it's great you're sober. And, let's all get better. Let's all get healthy together.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, there's just, the way I have expressed it and heard it expressed over the years is that, there are a lot of times when certain family members kind of need the sick person to stay sick.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't even know it. And they don't even know how they're undermining the recovery process. And a lot of times it is, I think, this need for them to stay in this position where they can kind of look down, I knew it was going to happen again sooner or later. This is what he does,
right. And now I have to do what I do.
Yeah, this is, saw this coming a mile away. Unfortunately, this is just how he is,
Yeah.
It's sad. Yeah.
And the thing I always tell him is, I just look at him and I say, how long have you been taking care of this person? Is it 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? How is it working? And by the time they get to me, they've gone through their therapist, the family therapist, the doctor, the psychiatrist, the school counselor, the minister, the rabbi, the priest, the life coach, and none of them have been able to give them an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's why I'm just super direct. And I know there are people that don't want to hear what I have to say. And that they meet me once and they're like, pass, I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then I have to be honest with you. Most of those people call back 6 months or a year later and they're like, and they're like, so how you said things were going to get worse, not better? I said, yeah. They're like, yeah, things are a lot worse.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. But that's what happens. Things don't get better all by themselves. The title of the book, Chronic Hope, is actually my buddy Josh Miller, who currently works for Choice House in Louisville, Colorado. He came up with the title, but I would describe it that every family I work with has this fantasy that tomorrow the addict is going to wake up and be like, oh my God, what have I been doing?
Right.
I have to stop this now. And that's just never going to happen. They'll die before that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that scares me too, is that I hate watching how far down people go. And, my position is, why not give them an option? Why not intervene and say, hey, you know what? We're not going to do this anymore. But if you want to get help, we'll help you with the help. But if you don't want to get help, we can't participate.
Yeah.
And they can't, a lot of times they just can't get there. They're like, no. I'm just going to keep sending him $500 a week and everything's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, you're going to kill him.
Well, and what you're talking about, just that action of doing something different is, that's something that I talk to family members about. You can't expect him to respond differently if you keep doing the same thing. You know? And there's a lot to be said for you responding differently to him. Now you do something different. And things begin to change when things change. They do.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
When all of a sudden the addict realizes that he's not getting what he wants or she or she wants, man, I got to tell you, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. What's going on here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the three sort of paths that you talk about in your book, one of the things I thought of as you're explaining them is that, it's really never quite that simple as we're going to take this one path. It's really, we're going to try this one And then if that doesn't work, we're going to go to the next one. And then if that doesn't work, and then maybe going back and, it's dynamic that way. It's never just that simple,
Oh yeah. Right. Exactly. And that's why I just try to give people like, hey, people come to me when their house is on fire.
Right.
And they need help putting out the fire. And so I have a very concise, direct way of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're used to is going to see someone in the mental health business who, walks up to the house, plugs the fire hose into the fire hydrant, and before they turn on the hose, looks at him and says, "So how does it make you feel that your house is on fire?"
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you think this happened? And why do you think the house is burning the way it's burning? And all these questions where the family's like, dude, turn on the hose.
Right.
Let's get this damn fire handled.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I try to do is say, let's just put the fire out right away. Let's triage the mess right now. And then we can start getting into, so let's talk about how we got here and what this looks like and why. And let's talk about what the next steps are and how we can heal the entire family, not just the addict.
Mm.
And that's where the real work comes from, because like I said, they tend to stand back and be like, whoa, our system's just fine. And again, my belief is, you are not responsible for your addict's addiction. You are responsible for how you respond to it.
Right.
And I think that's just critical, is helping people understand that, you have done nothing wrong, but, let's just, like you just said, let's change the way you're reacting. Because if you change the way you react, they're going to change. They're going to have to change the way they act,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely throws a wrench in the system when, when something changes. And, I say that the way I remember being in treatment, going through a Hazelden program and having one of those counselors on a grease board draw this picture of these gears that were all connected, and, how gears work. If this gear turns this way, then it makes that gear turn that way. And then the next gear, and they all, they're all in sync and working together. But if one of those gears stops and turns and starts going in the other, none of the other gears know what to do anymore. And it gums up the works. Yeah. So that's, and I don't know, guys, I think anyway, am pretty visual when it comes to stuff like that. But it's a good illustration of what a family system and what recovery really needs to look like. And, it could be, it can be easier or it can be harder. It's kind of, they kind of have a choice as to how they want it to be. If they want to participate, it could go a lot more smoothly. But, if there's not, and I really feel like for someone to get clean and sober, the more stakeholders who are involved, the better off they are. The more people who are willing to support and participate, and, because it's really that connection is what we all need and what we're all looking for. And just also as someone who has experienced this, and I'm sure, I know you have too, is just the sense of isolation that you experience when you're in the disease. It's just so debilitating. You think you're the only one on earth who's really going through this. It's intensely painful emotionally. All the shame that comes up because of the behaviors that you engage in, just aside from being ashamed that you're an alcoholic or a drug addict. It's you feel alone. And so just that simple, sincere connection from people who matter to you is really, really important. You know,
because I truly believe that, like you said earlier, that sense of fellowship and connection is so critical for success in sobriety, and you can't do it alone. It's one of the worst things that people think is that this is some sort of self-help program, and it's not. This is about a sense of community and an engagement, and that's just critical. It's just absolutely critical.
So if you could talk about just the importance of the atmosphere in which a person gets better. I mean, I say that, I think about, I'm a guy who, I grew up in central Indiana. I had a sister in Florida who was sober about a year and who helped me. But I come from this enormous family in the Midwest, and, I kind of knew if I went back, it wasn't going to work out very well. And, 23 years later, I love my family and all that. Now, I have, my life's different. There are different reasons why I wouldn't go back. But I knew then there was no way I could go back there, back into that system and remain sober.
Yeah. It was interesting that I went back into my family system and really thought because I had changed, they would change. And, and that's my expectation. It's no fault of theirs, but that just wasn't the case. My mom was still using, my dad was still spending his entire life sort of, getting her the prescriptions, and she was going to see doctor after doctor after doctor, and he was running around town filling the prescriptions and taking care of her, and like you said, the family system was a set of gears where everybody sort of played along. And then I kind of dared to throw a wrench in the gears, and I stood up and told my mom I thought she had a problem and she needed help. And that was like 2008 and 2009. Actually, 2009, 2010. And I got such a tremendously negative response from my family, and basically got told to mind my own business, that I had no idea what I was talking about. And the irony was that at that point, I think I was 19 years sober, and I was in graduate school, and I had a very good idea of what I was talking about. But they were comfortable with me being the identified patient,
right?
But they had no interest in me turning the sort of the mirror back on them and saying, "Hey, I'm not the only one here that needs help, and I think you guys, I think this whole family system needs to change." Unfortunately, my mom died 5 years ago of long-term prescription drug use. And I walked into the ICU, and she'd had 3 heart attacks, and she died. She died in the ambulance. She died in the ER, and she actually died again in the ICU. And they brought her back on machines. And this was November 24th, 2014. And I got there. My sister was in Florida with her kids, and I got there and said, the doc came out, the ICU doc, and he was just so apologetic. He's like, "I'm so sorry." I said, "It's okay. This is totally expected." And he's like, "Really? Because your dad's over in the the waiting room, and he's just bawling, and all he can say is, 'I just can't believe this. This is such a surprise.'" I looked at the guy. I said, "Look, man, I'm a therapist, and this is what I do for a living. And my mom's been a prescription drug addict since I was a kid. So Because then the doctor was like, that makes sense because we have given her everything we have and her body's not responding.
Right.
Because she came in with everything, and I'm like, I get it. I'm sad. I loved my mother. Don't get me wrong. I adored my mother, but there's no question in my mind that, she could still be alive today. But the family protected the system. That was more important. And that's sad, especially since they were happy to sort of step into me, which I was grateful for.
Right.
But when it came to making big shifts in the system, it was like, no.
Yeah.
We're not doing that. And it's interesting now that, everyone has acknowledged that my mom had a problem and that my mom needed help. Unfortunately, after the fact, right?
Yeah. It's hard to change. It's hard for people to change.
Yeah, it really is. And it's just sad. But again, so, this is why I do the work I do. This is why I wrote the book I do. And the next book I write is going to be more focused on the family and helping understand the family dynamics of where it comes from and why, and what needs to change. What does that change need to look like? The first book was really, how do we triage the problem? Okay, great. Now the second book is going to dig into the concept of how do we affect change in the family? Because if we can change the family system, we can affect so many people's lives. I always tell people, so I grew up in Palo Alto and in Silicon Valley, and back when it was just starting to blow up in the 80s. And I was born in 64 at Stanford Hospital. But the thing I learned early on I used to go to these graduate school of business seminars, entrepreneurial seminars in the 70s and 80s with my dad. He'd drag me to these things on the weekends and I'd be so hungover and I was so pissed. and I didn't realize that I was seeing the legends of Silicon Valley, right? These guys were like, the guys, and they were talking about, revolutionary ways of doing business, and that if a business is not going well, you don't fire the receptionist and the janitor. It's not their fault. It's the management team's fault.
Right.
And you got to go after the management team, and you have to rearrange the way the business does business. It's the same thing with the family. When you have struggles within the family, you don't go after the individual. You do go after the individual and you hold them accountable, but that's not all you do. You've got to step into the entire process and say, okay, so let's get this person the help they need. Let's get them safe. But now let's take a long, hard look about how we got here and what is the family system and how can we make a difference? Let's change this so that it doesn't happen again. And that's what I've really dedicated my life towards. That's what I really love doing. And that's what really excites me, is the opportunity to get to that space.
Well, I feel like culturally, there's so much aversion to looking within. I think about the people I meet outside of this little world of therapy and the helping profession that I kind of, live in most of the time. But you meet just the regular people out there. They don't want to talk about their feelings. They don't want to talk about their problems. They identify those sorts of topics as quote unquote depressing. Their introspection is just kind of, people don't want to do it. Is that just me, or do you notice that too? Yeah.
Oh, no. You're describing, let me tell you that the average, my day is spent like this. Okay, what do we do about the addict? Oh, okay, here's the plan. Okay, great. Let's get the addict rolling. Let's get this thing taken care of. Let's get the process started. Either they'll go voluntarily or we'll do the intervention. Great, fantastic. And then once that situation is dealt with, once the fire is put out, the family disappears.
Mm-hmm.
They just disappear, and then they'll start calling in a panic when the addict is about to come home from treatment.
Right.
And they will not engage in their self-care. They won't go to Al-Anon. They won't go to CODA. They won't go see an individual therapist. They won't read the books that I suggest. They won't engage with me. And I'm like, well, what do you expect is going to happen here? You can't, the fact that the addict's going to treatment and getting help is fantastic, but that doesn't heal the family system. And that's the real challenge that I have. That's the really hard part of the work that I do is getting them to acknowledge and understand that the whole family needs to get help, not just the individual. And that help, by the way, is not how do we manage the individual better? That's not the help. Because a lot of times when the families do engage, they're like, okay, how do we control this person? I'm like, no. Right. I always tell them, you are now out of the Kevin management business. You are no longer managing this person's life. That is their responsibility. Stop. So let's start taking care of you. And so pushing that concept 180 degrees around so that they actually start looking at themselves, that is the hard work that I do is engaging with these folks. And just sometimes you just have to listen a lot, and sometimes you have to be a little bit forceful. I mean, it's literally no different than listening to an addict or an alcoholic tell you, I don't have a problem. Everything's fine. Everybody goes to jail.
Right.
Everybody gets divorced 3 times.
Right.
Everybody has their kids taken away. Everyone gets fired. And it's like, no, I think you need to understand that that's not true. And you have to let them play it out. And then you kind of look at them like, well, I mean, how's that working? Because it sounds to me like it's not working.
Right.
And you've come to me for help, and I'm offering you help, and you're not doing it. Why do you keep coming? Mm-hmm. And so I tend to be kind of direct and pretty straightforward. And I try to be empathetic, and I try to be loving and caring, but, let's be honest, we're dealing with people that are dying.
Yeah. And I think part of this too is, for the family, there's the denial that, initially it's the denial that the person really has this illness.
Yeah.
And then when they enter recovery or, whatever, the denial that they have any inner work that they need to do. Because as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about, one of the things that I've encountered just countless times throughout my career, like, initially working in an admissions department, you get the phone call from the family because there's a crisis, and, it seems like it's going to be difficult to get the person into treatment. So they just table it. And then you'll just stop hearing from them. You'll just stop hearing from them. And then maybe a month down the road, usually probably closer to 3 to 6 months down the road, then you hear from them again because something else happened, and so a lot of times what I'll tell families the first time I talk to them is, listen, if you don't do it now, that there's a problem. If you don't do it now, don't stop engaging with me. At least if you don't feel like now is the time, be prepared for when it is the time. Don't wait until there's another crisis and then have your back against the wall all over again. Be ready for this. And, I have worked with a number of families over the years where the initial goal of engaging with them was just to be prepared when the opportunity presents itself to get the person into treatment. Because it isn't always the right time. And maybe it doesn't always make sense to do a formal intervention. And, and sometimes, I feel like sometimes, especially if there have been multiple treatments, I mean, there's at some point, there's got to be some engagement, from the person. Like the person really has to be invested in the process if it makes sense to go forward with this again,
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, it's just really interesting to see how people respond to these things. And, another thing I've observed over the years is, when that window of opportunity presents itself, you got to seize upon it. It's not just going to stay, and there's no guaranteeing that there will be another opportunity like that. So it is important to be prepared and to be decisive when that opportunity to get the person help presents itself.
Yeah. Oh no, you're preaching to the choir. I mean, that's what I always tell people. I mean, look, I don't want you to think I'm the Grim Reaper. I'm not trying to scare you. I just want to be clear with you. Right. This is not going to get better all by itself.
Right.
You're not going to talk sense into this person.
Right.
And so let's be super, super clear that, let's get this together. Let's make it happen. Let's lock this up and let's make it flow and let's do it right the first time. And, let's move forward. And, I mean, when it works, it's amazing and it's incredible. And the whole family, and I have families that have healed and families that have gotten better and go to Al-Anon and go to Coda and get their own therapy and work on their own stuff. And they flourish. They absolutely flourish. And the beauty of that is if the addict relapses or not even starts using again, but starts behaving poorly, the family's like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's no longer acceptable behavior. We're not doing that anymore. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful to watch. It's absolutely beautiful to watch.
Okay. So I have a question for you.
Okay.
So I am a believer, like obviously you have personal experience with this and that's how you ended up here doing this kind of work. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I've been told many times over the years, nobody ever does this kind of work just, because there's always something, whether they suffer from the disease or not, or they have family members. You don't end up here by accident. So, and then, I also believe a lot of what we do in life is in the interest of trying to resolve or heal a wound that's deep within us that's always needed tending. So in what way would you say, how do you experience this, like on an existential level in terms of your own personal healing? What role does helping people heal play in your healing process? How would you describe that?
That's an incredible question. And I agree with you. And I don't think anybody gets into the mental health business at all without having a wound that they're healing, and I think that's why I felt so grateful that I went to a university for my master's program that stressed so significantly my own work and my own introspection. And that I came from a 12-step background that stressed the exact same thing, my own, accountability and spiritual responsibility. Because, every time I sit with these families and I see the pain, I see the suffering, I see the scared, the faces, the terror, And let me tell you, they lash out at me. They're angry. They, tell me, they can be very unkind. And I get it because they're scared to death, you know. And but I know in my heart I'm telling them the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I know in my heart that I am trying to give them a path to helping the person and their family that's suffering the most at that moment. And also helping the family system, fix and heal as well, because I know the whole family's suffering. But when I say suffering, I mean that someone's close to death,
Right.
And it's so critical to me to be able to hand them something and say, here's the plan. You can follow it or you don't. It's totally up to you. And I'll coach you, or you can just go run down the street and figure it out yourself. But I don't suggest that because it won't work. But let me help you. Let me help you solve the problem, because it wasn't done in my house. It was done for me when I was 27, but it wasn't done for my mother. And so, sure, I'm healing that wound. But I'm also because I come from that 12-step world where I was taught clearly and concisely, your life is about helping other people, period. And therefore, you need to go out there and, help other people. That's your job. That's your responsibility. God got you sober for a reason. It wasn't so you could, make $1 million and buy stuff and, be successful on the outside. He got you sober so you could help other people. And I'm fortunate to have found, an environment like this where I can take this to a space where I'm blessed and fortunate enough to do this for a living as well, which I find to be fantastic.
So now you mentioned to me you were in sales in the past.
Yeah.
So has it been like a surprise to you that you turned into who you are?
No.
No.
Not really, because what I do, I really truly believe that what I do is a form of sales, and again, I don't mean I'm forcing anybody into anything. I'm not backing them into corners. I'm not trying to, one of the things I always make sure I tell the families is I get nothing from the treatment centers that I suggest to you. I don't get a kickback. There's no commission. There's no back end. There's just, I trust them. That's why I'm telling you to talk to them. And I've gone and I've seen them and I've, discussed things with them and I've seen what kind of people they are. And I trust them. But, I think it's important for people to know that, hey, I'm not, this isn't, I'm not pushing you to my buddies so I can make some cash out of this, So,
well, but there is a sales aspect to this.
Sure.
I mean, and that's in a way what I was kind of getting at, because when I think about my experience with treatment, one of the things that really got me to buy in was I saw guys who were happy and sober. And they were the kind of guys who I could see myself hanging out with. It was attractive, and as helpers, counselors, coaches, whatever, we're kind of, a lot of people would call it carrying the message, but we're kind of, we're selling something, which is, to me, in a nutshell, this is an opportunity for you to have a better life, and you deserve it. You deserve it, one of the things that I like to say, and a conviction that I have that comes from my 12-step experience is that, sober people, our job is to attract people and definitely not repel people. And the only way you can attract people is by living it.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's modeling behavior for other people. If someone can look at you and see, wow, he seems happy and he doesn't drink, you know, there must be something to this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I get that. I totally I don't disagree with you, but I also go back to the old attraction, not promotion, you know?
Right.
And that, you know, yes, I'm definitely sort of doing the indirect sales pitch by, well, you know, your life sucks.
Right.
you
Right.
know, and my life's awesome.
Right.
So, you know, which one do you want? You know, and I totally get where you're coming from on that one.
Yeah.
You know,
well, and to me, there's the distinction between the 12-step community, you know, where it is definitely attraction, not promotion.
Right.
But, you know, when you're getting paid to do it, you know, here's one of my pet peeves in the treatment industry. You know, someone who's a practitioner who picks up the phone and tells the family, you know, he just didn't want it.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? I think, you know what? It's your job to teach him how to want it. It's your job to help him understand why he should want it. That's a cop-out. He didn't want it is a cop-out. For people now, in the 12-step community, it's different. You know? You can't force feed it, but when you're getting paid to help families, I mean, to me, it's like at least have the, you know, at least don't say that. You know, give anything other than that, because that's just it's just a cop out.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. That's like, just I'm with you. I'm totally with you. No, and again, I think that kind of, you know, it also goes back to there's a lot of people that work with addicts and that don't understand. You know, they don't understand, and you know, that's the thing that I think scares me the most is that they're out there working with these people and they just don't get it, you know, and
well, and to me, where I see that a lot now at this point in my career is, or I have seen in recent years a lot, is they don't get codependency. And another pet peeve of mine that, you know, if you've listened to this podcast, you've heard me talk about it, that codependency is, you know, it's something I've heard a lot about for a long time. But, you know, I was sober probably 17 years before somebody told me, you know, there are 5 core symptoms. And here's what they are. And then after I really started to take a look at it and have a better understanding of it and how it applied to me and how it applied to my childhood, my adulthood, my parenting, you know, how I was living it. Then I started to see that there are an awful lot of people out there who are using codependency as a label to, you know, categorize clients. You know, to just, again, like, well, he's codependent, you know, and it's, and in my experience, more often than not, the people who use that the most are the ones who probably could use to taking a look at that themselves, you know, the ones who are really quick to label people that way. I mean, they're not in touch with how it's playing out in their lives.
Right.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
It's a judgment thing, you know, where, and this to me kind of goes back to, you know, if we're going to be helping people, we should be taking care of ourselves. Just like your graduate school wanted you doing your own work. And I'm a big believer in in an ongoing way. You know, if we're going to be engaging in this type of stuff, then we need support, we need supervision, we need feedback. You know, it's tough stuff, you know, and we need support.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, it kind of it goes back to the same thing. Is that, you know, it does really tie beautifully into the 12-step concept of, like they taught me, was, you know, you can't, you know, in order to carry the message, you have to have the message,
right?
You know, otherwise you're going to carry the mess,
right.
You know, and so, you know, do your own work, stay focused on, you know, taking care of you and getting good self-care and, you know, going to whatever it is you need to do to take care of you. Then you'll be available to help others.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't just go to graduate school, get a degree, slap up a license and say, I'm here and have your personal life be a total disaster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, and the same thing goes in sobriety, you know. But I think one of the most important things is to be authentic and genuine in both situations, and just say, you know, this is my reality. You know, this is my situation. Because here's the truth. Who would you rather, if you were going to go see a marriage and family therapist because your marriage was struggling, who would you rather see? Someone that's been married and divorced and knows what not to do, you know, or someone who's never really had any struggles whatsoever, you know, and they're like, oh yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I have never, you know, same thing with addiction. I don't really have any experience with this. I don't know what to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you want someone that's like, oh dude, I totally get it. I had this exact same problem in my house and this is how I handled it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
well, and for me, where I go in my head with that is a pretty drastic change took place in my professional life when I became a parent, because I deal with parents so often, and it was a lot easier for me to say, you know what you need to do? You need to do this before I became a dad. And, you know, after I became a dad and felt what that feels like, you know, that deep, like, tug that you feel all the time, you know, like, and how badly it hurts when you see your child suffering. You know, now I'm more likely to say, you know what, I'm sorry you're going through this. And, you know, I don't know. I can't tell you what you need to do, but here's some thoughts. And, you know, like, you need to decide what's going to work for you and how far you're going to go with this. But, you know, it's just a lot less. It's like when a lot of people think they know how to parent when they don't have kids, and they have real strong opinions about it. but it's a lot different when you're in the trenches doing it, you know. It really is. And it's the same way, I think, it applies to this too. It really does. And, it just makes a difference. So I guess it just speaks to empathy, really, is what it is.
Yeah.
It's easier to have that, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So if there's one golden nugget of knowledge that you'd want to pass on to family members before we close, what would that be, Kevin?
Oh boy. Just one?
Well, yeah, let's stick to the most important one.
The most important one, I would say, is that the most impact you can have, the best way to help someone who's either active in addiction or new in recovery, is to get into your own recovery. Take care of yourself. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. You got to take care of you.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you that you're saying that to a guy who, as a 23-year-old kid, had a mother who, began attending Al-Anon immediately and has ever since. And not only attended, but has been active, working the steps, taking people through the steps, and just having that in my immediate family, I made an enormous difference. Really, it's, just if for no other reason, because I knew I wasn't alone in it.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. And potentially your mom could stand up to you while you were still using and just say, no, we're not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And with love in her heart.
Yeah.
And I mean, what greater thing for a family member to be able to say to an active family member, an addict who's a family member who's an active addict, than to say, I love you, but I'm not putting up with this anymore.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. It's powerful.
It's amazing. Oh my God. Yeah. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
So,
well, listen, man, it's been great having you on here. I really appreciate it. And
it's my pleasure.
Yeah. And I look forward to talking again soon. And maybe we can have you back on here sometime after I read your book. Thanks for listening to The Path to Authenticity. If you'd like to learn more about our guest, you can find links in the show notes or visit our website at thepathtooauthenticity.com. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, if you have a suggestion for a topic, or you know someone who would make a great guest, email the show at thepathtooauthenticity@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you know someone else who would enjoy the show, or even just a particular episode, please share it with them. Every little bit helps. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider becoming one wherever it is you choose to listen. You can find the show on Patreon, where by becoming a patron, you can hear episodes before they're released publicly. You can gain access to supplemental content. There are other benefits in the various tiers. Visit patreon.com/thepathtooauthenticity. Join our Facebook community or follow the show on Instagram, both at The Path to Authenticity. We also have a YouTube channel. You can connect with us on Twitter or Pinterest. To hear the songs from this and every episode, you can find the Path to Authenticity playlist on Spotify. Obviously, there are a lot of ways you could be spending your time, so I appreciate you spending some of it here with me. I'm Tom Gentry. Thanks for listening. Be nice.
Great, honeybee.
The Path to Authenticity is powered by Equivox. For digital marketing and web design services, visit equivox.com.